off for the next two sessions. So first up, we've got Matteo Zallio. I thought I was going to say that wrong again then. So he's going to be talking about inclusive workplaces, all about futuristic AI, and he is an assistant professor at the University of Cambridge. So I think you're in for a treat here. So this one, and then one more, and then you've done. Keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Well, good afternoon, everybody. How do you feel? Well, tired? The coffee wasn't enough? Or the tea wasn't enough? Or you're waiting for drinks? So, well, I know it's late. It's late afternoon. You're looking for a piece of cake or to talk with hippos tomorrow or maybe for drinks later. But today, we're going to spend 20 minutes together to figure out how inclusive design is so impactful for the workspace. So my name is Matteo Zallio. I'm originally from Italy. I lived in a few countries before landing in the UK. And I'm an assistant professor at Cambridge, but I consult and work a lot with companies. So today is about inclusive design. And if you don't know, well, we are quite lucky at Cambridge to have an inclusive design group where actually inclusive design was conceived a couple of decades ago, around 1992, 1993. So, before we start, I have two questions for you. I want you to spend 3 seconds looking at the picture over the screen. Imagine yourself, you are at a restaurant. Have you ever feel excluded when having a dinner at a restaurant? Yes. I guess we can leverage Audium here and record a few audios here and learn more about your yes. Cool. Can I ask you why? I heard a yes somewhere there.
Noise.
Noise. So acoustic exclusion. Another yes here? Who was the? Sorry?
Same thing.
Noise. Well, of course, from you. Noise. Age. Ooh. Okay, age. Totally. Social grouping.
Yes. You get two friends busy talking to each other and there's 6 of you and you're at the end of the table going,
No way.
So social grouping.
Absolutely.
When you ask for vegetarian options and they bring out chips or salad on the menu.
Totally with you. Oh my gosh. Or vegan sometimes, if that's possible.
Speedy service.
Speed of service.
Speedy service.
Oh, speedy service.
Yeah.
What do you mean by
What
that?
would you like? I'll come back in 2 minutes.
Oh.
Are you finished? Would you like it to go? Turn around.
I was thinking about the Wi-Fi speed, actually. But that's a good one.
Or how is it before you even have a taste?
So we started from thinking about dinner, which we're getting close, to talking about workplaces, offices. Now, before we have been discussing that not only a workplace is an office, but it's a kitchen, it's a bus, it's a school, it's here. We're working now, aren't we? Well, maybe not. So I got a lot of interesting insights from you in just a minute. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper in what and how can we define inclusion, and therefore, before defining inclusion, how can we define exclusion? Because I think sensing the negatives, as I probably asked this morning, often customers give feedback when they are angry with the product they use. Often customers give feedback when they are not satisfied about what they buy. So let's think for a moment about exclusion. As you probably all know, physical exclusion. Entering a room and you're a wheelchair user, and my dear friend Kim has a lot of experiences and examples about that, letting people to try out what physical exclusion means. For example, using a wheelchair for a couple of minutes. It's already enough to have empathy about who uses a wheelchair. But also there is sensory exclusion. A lot of you were talking about the senses such as auditory or perhaps also visual or olfactory senses. And again, it's not just about seeing, but also about listening. And I'll tell you a little story about me. My accent is not British, nor American, nor Australian. It's a mix of maybe different places where I lived. But I'm originally from Italy. And sometimes when I speak, maybe it's hard for people who are, not native English speaker, or maybe even native English speaker, to understand some of the words that I say because, well, my accent is not properly, contextualized for the place where I'm currently living. So imagine if there is low noise absorption into a meeting room, and I'm trying to have a meeting, and I have to convey a message to change the narrative into a company that I'm working with. Well, what's the sense of authority I have when I convey the message if there are nuances that are actually making it tricky for the audience to understand about what I'm saying? But there is something even more. We have been talking a lot about neurodiversity in recent years. 2 years ago, a new PASS, which is it's a document that precedes a standard. The new PASS 6463, Design for Neurodiversity, was released by BSI, and it's a lot about design for the mind, design for neurodiversity. And cognitive exclusion is really about that. A person with ADHD really finding hard to focus in the workplace, or a person with dyslexia being at the underground and not being able to read clearly what the signage says. And we know how overwhelmed we get when we are rushing to get to the Cavendish Center or going to work or just going home. And so inclusion at a wider scale not only impacts those that have a physical, a sensory, or a cognitive disability, but really impacts everyone, everybody, every single person in the world, because everyone felt excluded at some point during your life and during our life. So today I'm going to focus this talk, which I don't want to be only a talk because I want you to be responsive and keep the level of sugar and blood sugar high up to the next presentation. We're talking about why and how. I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm just showing you what we found. So what are the factors that contribute to still see places that are not fully inclusive? Why we don't live in a world that is 100% inclusive? Well, the answer might be easy, but I want to share with you just a couple of sneak peeks on some research I've done in the past few years at Cambridge. And we look at the regulations and the policies, thousands of documents all over the world, and we did that before AI was a thing. So unfortunately, we had to read everything with our eyes. So it was quite a lot of work. That's why I need to wear contact lenses or glasses now. We did interview a lot of practitioners and experts. We did run surveys, also did run workshops. So we collected a bunch of quant and qual data to better understand where are we in terms of inclusive design in our society. It's very complicated here, but I'll try to make it simple for you because I like visualizations, but sometimes it takes so long to explain. This was the result of a study over the policies and regulations across EMEA, America, and part of the APAC market to understand what do we have to do according to the regulations and what is the correlation with ways to assess how did we do our work. In a nutshell, we design workplaces, we design buildings, we follow regulations, but then do we measure, do we assess, do we benchmark how good the design is and how is performing for the people who are actually using the building or the workplace, such as building occupants? Well, in a nutshell, we found that there is an evolutionary latency. Sorry, I'm so bad in pronouncing that word, but I picked a complex word because we're academics. So basically, there is a gap of 10 years on average between the release of a standard or a policy or a regulation and the release of a post-occupancy evaluation tool that can help you to assess and benchmark the level of inclusion or the level of human-centered design or user-centered design, call it as you want. And we witnessed that across product design and also across the built environment. 10 years is really, really a long time. Then we didn't stop there because we found, well, if we got knowledge, how do we bridge the gap with those that might not be able to access that knowledge? So we did run a lot of interviews with practitioners from all over Europe mostly. And we found a big, big gap, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, in knowledge and awareness. So there are various nuances about knowledge and awareness. The uses of terminology that sometimes doesn't permeate the routine, the daily working routine of designers, architects, facility managers, or maintenance and facility service providers. So it's not just about facility managers, but also who does maintenance in a building. And speaking with one of your colleagues, we found that they told us this story. We designed a building that was inclusive according to the highest standards of the BS 8300, which is one of the most renowned standards in the country, very well used across Europe to make sure that you design for inclusion and accessibility. Well, we made everything possible, but then a couple of years ago, the so-called disabled toilets were used to store cleaning products. So basically, by who were doing maintenance, they said, well, we're going to put some stuff here because it's a larger toilet, we have more space, so we're going to be good, and it's close to the other toilets when we have to clean them. So it's not just about terminology and, of course, how do we speak about inclusion, but also about education and awareness. And then the juicy part here, what I really like. You people love numbers. We saw that throughout the day. I saw your eyes opening up when you were seeing numbers and stats. Survey. We love surveys in academia, I know, but this is a little bit more than a survey. We got data from a quite good number of people, more than 115 participants, architects, designers, and engineers that were interested or were invested in inclusive design. So remember, the caveat is that these people know very well what they're talking about. And I'll tell you later why this caveat. Well, we found that the vast majority of participants reported that clients want them to design in accordance to the basic legal and policy and regulations requirements. Not more than that. 41%, it's quite big. But the interesting thing is that another 36% reported that clients request basically best practice compliancy. So if the minimum regulation is to have X amount of toilets for people with disabilities, X amount for male, female, and gender neutral, well, they want to go a little bit above and beyond, but that's it. The minority, 12%, didn't report feedback, but 11% instead are those that are really pushing the boundary above and beyond what are the minimum accessibility and inclusive design standards. And that's really a teeny number. But also, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just wanted to highlight, look at the bottom of the pyramid here. We've got a large number. These are cumulative data, so people reported about multiple options. But basically, they said more than 70% of the respondents said that project budget was a really big constraint. And we found a correlation with project time. So the timeline and time and cost, essentially, doesn't push clients to request for a project brief as well as for a design and construction of a facility or a building that is truly inclusive. There are other factors here, but I will highlight them in the next slide. So as a summary, we found that only 10%-ish of respondents said that building owners and clients are well informed about the benefits of designing inclusively. So 9 out of 10, they basically know nothing. But interestingly, more than 7 out of 10, so the vast majority, said that building owners and clients fail to perceive the value of inclusive design. And here we kind of starting to connect the dots with knowledge, awareness, practices, and maybe measuring and assessing. So we found Another caveat, correlation doesn't mean causation. However, we had the opportunity to validate that the scarcity of clients' awareness of inclusive design, the fact that I don't know about what inclusive design is, unfortunately, it's strongly correlated with the lack of perceived value. So do I value a professional that comes here and tells me, well, you have opportunities to spend the same amount of money, but make maybe the nosing of that staircase a little bit more accessible and inclusive because we're going to highlight the nose with a color contrast and different material. So even when I'm distracted, I can walk down the stairs and actually I'm not going to fall, for example. So these are interesting data. But what we found in the end that is critical for all of us is that awareness education is important, but the design process that is informed by awareness and education has to be streamlined towards the criteria that allow us to play a design process that is actually going towards above and beyond the minimum standards. And one last thing. Joyce mentioned about return on investment on biophilic design. Well, how do we measure the return on investment on the social and human capital when we design for inclusion? Right now, it's really, really challenging. Up so far, there hasn't been many studies that tried to collect data to understand the return on investment when we design for inclusion. Because it's a weak problem. It's too complex. It's not that we are trying to assess the usability and the ergonomy of this clicker. No, it's much more nuanced and complex because you know why. So we're moving towards the how. How means that we needed to find a way to validate this data. We needed to find a way to understand how can we help businesses to design for inclusion more often, and how do we help them to assess what they do. Is it good? Is it not good? Is it good enough? And so we worked to develop a toolkit that is not just a business proposition for a toolkit, but it's something that we want to use, and we have been using with companies to continuously assess how do we raise the bar of awareness and how we help companies to understand that there is value in designing for inclusion. One is the Inclusive Design Canvas. It's a free-to-use template that allows you to brainstorm more inclusive design concepts with your team. So we're talking about the design and pre-design phase. And the other is Inclusify. It's a tool to assess and measure the social return on investment on inclusive designs. Post-occupancy. Joyce, thank you for that. The Inclusive Design Canvas helps you to collect information, but most importantly, to brainstorm information that are useful useful for you to get to the design requirements. So it's about the journey, it's about the people, it's about their needs, but it's about their capabilities, and ultimately, with a way to visualize information, you can actually summarize what are the design requirements. I'll go a little bit quick here, but you can download it, and there is a link, and there is a QR code at the end of the presentation. So no, don't take a picture because it's going to be very low quality. You can download a PDF, which is a vector file, very high resolution, so don't bother. That's the Inclusive Design Canvas. We have been using it with businesses to help them to brainstorm more inclusive design solutions. We start by filling up with Post-its stories about the employees or the people that are working in the company. Then we discuss and discover about the capabilities. What can I do? What I can't do. Capabilities are then translated into needs. You're very aware that wants are different than needs. If I tell you I want a chair because I want to sit and I'm a good designer, maybe I'll ask you about how you're going to sit. What are you going to do? What are your needs? What is your journey? Because maybe you don't need a chair. Maybe you need a stool. If you are at a bar, at a counter, and you want to get a drink. And then ultimately, you get this information to understand the design requirements. What is critical versus what is important. And very quickly, Inclusify. We have been talking about the design phase, but how critical is to understand what we do after we design. We don't want to just close our game when we finish our nice design and we deliver it, but also, as before was mentioned about the operations. It's really critical to understand what's going on, how the building evolves, and how the people in the building make the building to evolve in different ways. So I've been working as a UX researcher a lot in my previous career as well in businesses, and understanding the experience is critical to improve products. So understanding people's feelings as well as what does it mean for a person versus another sense of inclusion. And before you gave me some great questions, some great answers to my first question, really help you to understand, well, did we deliver a good design here? And so with this tool, we're really trying to help organizations to better understand who we talk with, who we design for, but also what is their perception of the physical space and how the physical space allows them to work in different ways with people. Because ultimately, the correlation is not just between people and places, but it's between people, and places. So it's like a triangular, it's a three-vertex figure that connects these three entities. I don't have time to go into the details, but if you have any questions, let me know, email me. Here is a very quick sneak peek of the report and some of the dashboards that we create to understand how we can make better decisions based on what the perception of the space, right now physical, but we've been working already on the hybrid and virtual spaces because there is a lot of inequalities between people working in a physical environment compared to people who cannot work in a physical environment and they work from home or remotely. So I just wanted to share with you two quotes here from two of the organizations that we've been working for in the past couple of years. And it's really about the opportunity to finally measure how you do your job and how you design for inclusion. Here is another where we've got the opportunity to really benchmark before the design and after the design. And this is what sometimes with post-occupancy, it's really hard to benchmark because post-occupancy happens just at the end of the design. We cannot compare, we cannot benchmark with what happened before the design. So right now we're really invested in finding ways to better measure the social return on investment about inclusive design and accessibility. And so these are just some initial findings, but it's an ongoing process. We're early stage, but there is a strong, really big value in investing when we talk about inclusive design. I will leave this to you. Take it as a grain of salt. But my last question for you is, what are you waiting to make inclusion a priority? And so for us, like for many of you that have been talking to each other or presenting today, it's really about starting to leverage the power of insights to make better decisions. But it's hard to convince to convince the hippos or to convince people and get the buy-in when it's really hard to prove that there is actually a return on investment, not from the point of view of the cost, the time, but from the point of view of the people. Retention in certain companies, it's really, really becoming so tricky to improve. And so what can we do better to decrease churn for the employees in certain companies and increase retention? These are some of the questions that we're trying to find answers to. So I guess we are almost at the time. If you want to scan the QR code, it's easy to get in touch with me. But thank you for taking part to this study today and answering my questions.
Great. Any questions?
Hi, that was really interesting. Thank you very much. found it fascinating that you interviewed property professionals, and I wonder if it came up in that, because you talked about clients and you also talked about building owners and then the barriers to inclusive design. But more often not, the building owner is very different from the client. And did that come up at all? And what came out of that? Because there's this very complex sort of chain of ownership and property, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. And absolutely. When we segmented data from the interviews, we found that there are nuances and differences. As you said, clients and building owners, somehow, depending on the design process, they are completely different entities. So the major difference is, the major similarity is that the awareness they have about inclusive design is very low because it's not actually very much promoted. And this is what we understood from the interviews with the intermediaries. So, as I mentioned, architects, engineers, or design practitioners. The biggest difference is that sometimes they have a better or an easy way to get their buy-in if they're speaking directly with the owner, because they are much more invested into, we're spending and investing money with this. Maybe it's better we understand how you're actually spending the money on the project, on the design, especially in the design brief phase. In the other case, it appears that it's slightly more tricky, but we're really looking forward to also, do more work on that because it evolves as well pretty rapidly. So studies of this in 5 years might be completely different, giving completely different or new or more nuanced results.
Over it. We've got quite a long way to go. I've got a couple of examples from recently. There was a tweet that went, an X, is it a tweet still? Whatever it is. Anyway, it went viral, and what it happened was a lady was going to get the tube on the Elizabeth line around 6 a.m. And the person that was meant to get her onto the tube was late for work, and this lady was left on the platform basically having arranged support to get onto the tube. I thought, that's the Elizabeth line. Now, if it was one of the older ones, I'd kind of accept it. But how have we built a new tube and spent that much money on it and not put something that is accessible for people? It's just really, really basic. And then another example was I was in a building in central London a few weeks back, and a male in a wheelchair had his female PA with him, and the building, a well-known building, had actually put in the accessible toilet in the males and the females, and his female PA had to go into the male bathroom to take him and support in the bathroom. And I was just like, head in hands moment, like, how are we still getting this so wrong? But, yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Well, it's really amazing to hear that we share very similar methodology. And actually, after my presentation, Nigel came to me and asked, well, but you haven't quite explained how you get from all this workshop data then to become the social return on investment. I thought you might be able to give a better answer than me. Would you like to elaborate on this? I'm sure a lot of audience is really, wondering how we can achieve that. I would like to do it, but I probably need an hour more.
Thank you for the question, Joyce. And the quick answer is, can we work together? Because it's not a one group or one person effort, because as I mentioned before, it's a wicked problem. It's like an equation with many multiple variables, and it's really hard to solve because the return on investment can be measured differently for different companies. Some companies can measure it by time and money saved, some others for customer retention or maybe employees retention. So in a nutshell, it's really about trying to segment the data from different countries, because we found that, for example, in the Nordics region of Europe, the social return on investment is understood differently and perceived differently from the southern part of Europe, or for example, Middle East. So, for example, one way to approach this complex problem is segment the information and data across, let's say, cultural pockets or countries, if we want to call them countries, but countries is like a geographical definition, but I would aim for more cultural definitions because, that's one example, but I think partnering with all of you who have an interest or want to discover more, it's really important because, we kind of do everything in silo or sitting in a lab, so it's an open invite.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to add one more point. Perhaps we should start thinking about the unit of change. I mean, in the context of workplace, looking at not just post-occupancy evaluation, it's pre and post, so before and after. So we make sure that we do have a baseline, whatever baseline it is, and then the design improvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.